Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Stephen Nussbaum. In the podcast, I invite my guests to come on and talk to me all about their musical tastes, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collate their fantasy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. We are now on episode number 136. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone's all right as we are now into the summer holidays. Hopefully the sun is shining where you are. Hopefully you're about to go on a summer holiday and enjoy yourself. And if you do, don't forget to go back into the Fantastival vaults and listen to some older episodes, and you'll be able to find the last episode of the podcast where I had Stevie T on, hashtag murdered song of the day overlord. He was a great guest. Lots of new listeners to the podcast, so if you are a new listener, thank you for listening. Stevie was a wonderful guest, so if you've not listened to that, please go back into our vaults and do so. You will not regret it. A great episode, and thanks to Steve for coming on. So that was 135, and this is 136. I'm so excited about my guest this week. I have joining me singer, songwriter, the genre-hopping storyteller. That's such a great quote. Amazing. It can only be the one and only. It's Mr. Joe Peacock.
Hi. Thanks. That's an amazing intro.
Joe, I do my best. I always love to do the amazing intros. It's amazing to finally have you on the podcast, and a great time to have you on. We'll find out all about why it's such a great time to have you on. But before we talk about music, I always like to check in with my guests, find out how they're doing from a mental health perspective. So Joe, mate, how you doing?
I'm all right at the moment, actually. Yeah, a little bit weary. It's like gigs last week before I go off on holiday. So yeah, got loads of stuff to finish off and a bit kind of... But yeah, otherwise all right. Yeah, not in too bad a space at the moment.
That's great to hear. I'm a bit like you in that headspace. So I'm off on holiday on this coming Friday, and lots to do and lots to sort out. But anyway, this is all about the positive of music and not negative of going on holiday and being stressed out about it and not knowing what's going to come. So, Joe, obviously I gave you the introduction. I'm guessing most people listening will know you, but if anyone doesn't, Joe, tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, so I live in Birmingham, and I have released 3 albums so far, plus a few EPs and singles and things like that. I record them all here in this room at home where I'm talking to you from, and I like experimenting with different types of music. So some of it's quite electronic, some of it's very heavy guitar-based kind of stuff. And as you said, kind of genre-hopping storyteller, like my songs are like not normally love songs, things like just vague collections of words that I like to pick interesting stories and write songs about those. So often I disappear off down an internet rabbit hole and just like read about all these weird people and then come up with a song about one of them. So that's the kind of thing that I like doing. I released my first album in 2021 in this kind of period of my career. So I had a long break, and it was during lockdown that I started writing and recording music again. So yeah, and I'm a solo artist, but I'm also in a duo as well. So I play in a kind of alt folk duo with a woman called Louisa Davis Foley. We're called the Mist Trees, and so that's the one that I do live. My solo stuff is all just kind of online, really.
Amazing stuff. It's amazing that all that comes out of one room. It's incredible work you do there, Joe. You must be really proud. So, I mean, let me take you back then. What are your early memories of music? What do you recall from your childhood upwards?
So there was always music on in our house, pretty much more than telly, I think. So my dad was a music journalist. He wrote for Sounds and The Melody Maker, and so he'd kind of stopped doing that by the time I was old enough to know what was going on. But yeah, our living room was like wall-to-wall vinyl of all this stuff that he'd collected throughout his career. And, he had very varied tastes. So, we'd have classical music on in the house sometimes, and then other times it'd be like really experimental jazz, and then like rock and psychedelic stuff and acoustic stuff, all kinds of stuff. And then in the 80s, he would listen to the more modern stuff then. So there was like synth music going on and all kinds of things. So, I inherited some very strong opinions on music from my dad. As much as being a music lover, there's a lot of stuff, having been a critic, there's a lot of stuff that he doesn't like. So I tend to be quite kind of picky and harsh on certain kinds of music that I don't like.
And in terms of, I guess, musical instruments, is that how you got into music, by just instruments in the house, I guess, because there was so much music in the house, or did that kind of follow later?
Yeah, not really. I mean, my dad, although he wrote about music, he didn't play it himself, really. So my mum had a piano, which I would make a horrible noise on sometimes. I never had lessons. So it wasn't really till I was a teenager, and I was probably 13, and there was this amazing music teacher at our school called Mr. Drury. So it was like Ian Drury, but not as in Ian Drury and the Blockheads, but the music teacher in our school. And so he taught me to play drums, first of all. So I would like be playing drums every lunchtime at school in the music room, jamming with other people. Yeah, so I started playing in bands when I was 15, and I was just a drummer then. But I was always writing songs as well and trying to get them to play my songs more or less successfully sometimes. And then it wasn't really till I was about 20, 21 that I switched to playing guitar, because by that stage I was in a band at university. We did quite well. We were like one battle of the bands, and we played some quite good gigs around Kew University where I was. But I was drumming and singing, and that's a really hard thing to do. So I decided I wanted to be a proper frontman, so I switched to playing guitar properly.
Great stuff. And then obviously you said you kind of took a break from kind of writing your own stuff and then kind of started again during lockdown. And how did you find that process, and I guess, of getting back into it? Because it seems like once you get out of music, it can be quite hard to get into it. So how did that process happen for you?
Yeah, well, it was, I mean, you were talking to Stevie last week about lockdown and the effect of that. And my story was a bit similar to his, really. I mean, I was home educating my kids and I was on furlough, and I needed a break from that. And so I started off just playing covers. So I kind of set myself a challenge to learn a new cover every day and posted a few on social media. This was before Murdered Song of the Day, before I knew those guys. But yeah, they got some quite good reactions. And then, like, just from playing all these other people's songs, I started coming up with my own riffs again and thinking, oh yeah, actually, I really like writing songs. And so the first one that I wrote was called Butterfly in a Giant's Hands. And that was based on something I'd been doing at work when we were looking at the stories of this long stay hospital that had been closed down. And so we were hearing about the stories of the people who'd lived there, and I wrote this story about this guy who was like a real gentle giant, and he used to carry butterflies around the grounds of the hospital and stuff. So yeah, it was a very poetic thing, I thought, and I turned it into a song.
And then since then, like, I guess you've been fairly prolific. If all these songs are new, then that's a lot of material to have. Obviously, you said 3 albums and a couple EPs. And I think the first album that we just spoke about earlier came out in April 2021. So are these all new songs that you're releasing? Or have you gone kind of back into some of the stuff you'd written when you were younger and kind of recorded it for present day?
I recycled a couple of riffs, but all the lyrics are new. And they sound... Any of the ones where I recycled the riffs, I've completely changed the songs from how they sounded before. So yeah, it's all new stuff. And my trouble actually is I write too many songs and I just can't keep up with them. So I've got like a backlog of 30 or 40 songs at the moment that are here ready to be kind of recorded properly and released. So my limitations are in my kind of technical abilities to make things sound good. And yeah, if I had loads of money, I could just pay a producer to kind of help me sort it all out instead of having to do it all in my front room here. Then it'd be a lot easier if I could just go into a studio for a weekend and like bash out a load of songs, and then someone else tidies them all up and makes them sound amazing.
Well,
that'd be great.
You did have a bit of help on the second album, right? So Fred of the podcast, former guest, the one and only wonderful Joe Adhemar, helped with the second album, right? So the second album before the robots told us where to go.
Yeah, very much so. So yeah, that he had a big influence on that album. So I met him on Twitter. I only met him for the first time in person last week, actually. So I was down in Oxford at the Sylvie gig. And so finally got to meet Mr. Adhemar face to face, which was a pleasure.
Wow.
He's just as nice in real life as he is online. So yeah, I met him on Twitter, and I like asked him what he thought of a few things, and he's like, "Your songwriting is great, but your recording is awful. Would you like some help with that?" And I was like, "Yes, please." So I sent him some demos of a few songs, and there were a few that he really liked and just wanted to have a go at. So yeah, he did, and I loved what he did with them. I was like, "Oh, can you do that, like the whole next album for me?" So yeah, we came to an agreement on how we would do that, and I was kind of a bit of a guinea pig for him in terms of first time producing somebody else to that extent. And so yeah, I think there are 10 songs on the album, and all but one of them he produced, and some of them he completely transformed the sound, and they sound nothing like what they sounded like originally. Whereas other ones, he just like tidied it up and added some subtle things to improve them. And yeah, he always tends to change the drums and the bass, but most of it's my stuff still.
That was brilliant. So that was the second album. Then you had the follow-up third album, which was the last album in full, which was Mirror Neuron Generator, and that came out last year and has obviously done really well, and some great quotes that I saw from that album as well. So it seems like the momentum, kind of the start of your songwriting, has really carried you through.
Yeah, but that was released kind of like 6-8 months after the one before, so, and then now that's 12 months on and so I haven't quite kept the momentum going in terms of the number of releases since then. Yeah, that was much more my own work, that album. I got some help with the mixing and mastering, but I didn't have anyone else producing that one, so that was all my work, and all the songs sounded exactly as I wanted them to, but it was a lot less guitar on it. So in a way, where I think where I struggle most in the production is like getting the live instruments to sound good, the guitar and the bass, and when it's lots of synths layered over each other, then it's I find it a little bit easier to kind of handle getting the sound balance a bit better. Not to be too technical and boring.
No. You can be as technical as what you need to be, Joe. It's all good. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, an exciting time for you, right? So you had a single out earlier this year, which was On Fire Again. I listened to that, really good single. But we do have a new release to talk about, Joe. We've got your forthcoming EP, The Curse of the Mind. That's out on Friday, the 18th of August. So I guess tell us about the EP.
Okay, yeah. So there are 4 songs on this one. And yeah, we were talking about mental health a bit earlier. So these are, as you can tell from the title a little bit, they're all linked a little bit around kind of things that happen in the mind. So there's a bit about mind control. So there's the first track on there is called Thought Camera. And that was something that Nikola Tesla thought of. It would be a brilliant idea to invent this thing where it could project your thoughts onto a wall so people could see what you're thinking. No, I'm not quite so sure that's a great idea, but it kind of got me thinking about how these inventor types and these like rich people would like to get more control over what we're thinking and know what we're thinking so they can sell things to us more and that kind of thing. So, and what with Elon Musk being kind of calling his cars after Tesla, then I thought, so is that something that he's after? Is it controlling our thought processes and that kind of thing? So that's kind of the thing behind that one. And then there's another song on there which is called The Cult of Fake Heroes, which is based on like Soviet era propaganda. So in the Soviet Union, they had this story about this guy called Pavlik Morozov, who was like this kid who lived in this village in Siberia. And the story that the Soviets promoted was that he was this kind of proud pioneer who was very patriotic. And so he dobbed in his dad for un-Soviet behavior. And then his dad was kind of like taken off to be re-educated or whatever. And then his family gained revenge on him and kind of, took him out. So then he was this martyr to the Soviet Union and like inspired all these songs and statues everywhere. And he was like not like that at all in reality. But that story didn't come out till many, many years later. So that was another one of the songs that I wrote. And then there's another one called Poltergeist, which is kind of about whether haunting and kind of the supernatural is something inside the mind or outside the mind, because there's a bit of debate on that. There was a book that I read about it which was very interesting. the people who experience these things, are they a little bit disturbed, or is it actually a real thing? So, I go for these normal kind of things that people write songs about.
So I must say, Joe, I've heard the EP. It's fantastic. Well done to you, and anyone who is interested in that can listen to that from Friday the 18th of August. I urge you to do so. It's fantastic. So, Joe, your music crosses over a wide range of genres. But for you, what do you like listening to? I imagine it's quite a wide berth, considering how wide kind of your music architectural structure is for your tunes. But what music are you into?
So, yeah, it is very varied. So it really depends on my mood. So, I mean, in past few years, I've been to see The Orb, I've been to see Swerve Driver, I've been to see lots of new bands like Heavy North. Went to see Sylvie the other week, been to see Three Little Wolves. So I really like electronic music, and I like guitar music, I like acoustic music, and I will go and watch jazz and classical music as well. Yeah, I listen to all kinds of stuff. I really depends on my mood. It depends on what's in front of me and what's inspiring me at that time. So I just like things that really kind of open my mind in some way and challenge me in a way. I don't go for the safe stuff generally.
So what are you listening to at the moment? So whether it's old or new, what's kind of been the last couple of acts who have kind of appeared on your, whether it's Spotify or whether it's a CD you're throwing in your CD player? What's kind of been on your list recently?
Well, the album I've listened to most this week is the new Blur album, which I think is superb. And I also really liked the album that Graham Coxon did earlier this year with, it was The Wave, he called it. And so that was a collaboration. And I've shamefully forgotten the name of the woman that he did it with, but she's great as well. So they're great. I really like Fontaine's DC, actually. And I thought the solo album that the singer brought out recently was really good. Really interesting. I love his lyrics. He's got such a poetic way with words. I think he's brilliant. And I know a lot of people don't like the Arctic Monkeys' new stuff, but I really enjoyed their Glastonbury set when I watched that from the sofa. Obviously, I wasn't at Glastonbury, being a family man and not being able to take a week off during certain time like that. But yeah, that was fantastic. But yeah, I mean, there's so much great stuff in the new indie music scene that I really enjoy listening to as well. So yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of music around at the moment, and until I was really getting into making my own music again, then I wasn't aware how much great music there was coming out at the moment. Yeah. And it's a real eye opener when you do.
Yeah, it's like the main best thing about this podcast is it's opened my eyes to so many great new acts all across the UK and beyond even. So yeah, it's amazing what I guess a new kind of overview or a new kind of thing can do for you. So Joe, let me take you back then to when you was a younger lad. You had some money in your pocket and you was about to go out and buy your first album or your first single. Do you remember what they were and your experiences of buying that?
I remember both of them. So if you've seen what I was posting on Twitter earlier, you'll probably know what the single was. Did you spot that?
I have barely been on Twitter today, apart from to tag Stevie T in his Fantastival. I need to go and catch up. But I did see you do the Shaky song yesterday that I must commend you on, which went down a treat.
That was it. Green Door, that was my first single. So I thought I'd do a quick cover of that. Yeah, so that was the first 7-inch single that I got. I don't know whether I don't remember actually whether I bought it myself or whether my parents gave it to me as a present. But yeah, I definitely remember that being my first single. And then my first album was Complete Madness by Madness, obviously. And I used to love the Nutty Boys. I'd bounce around the living room to them all the time. They were my favourite band for a long time when I was younger.
Yeah, it's still going strong, right? So they still fill out arenas at Christmas time. They're still doing new material. So I guess you can only commend Madness for being what they are. A superb band. And
very underrated songwriters as well. I think the lyrics are really good and, yeah, really stands the test of time, I think, their songs.
Yeah, I mean, most of their songs, 40 years now, give or take? Mm-hmm. And hear them on the radio and they sound as classic or as modern as what I guess you want to make them out to be, but you can easily hear their influence in many new acts coming through, which I guess is another testament to Madness. So Joe, you mentioned you're a bit of an older man, family man these days, no chance of Glastonbury, but do you enjoy the festival? Have you been to many a festival?
I mean, I have been to Glastonbury a few times in the past. Last couple of times I went there, I was volunteering with Friends of the Earth, so I got a free ticket and I got to go in that way. So I had to work a few shifts while I was there, but I still got to see most of the acts that I wanted, so that was fantastic. And yeah, I mean, festivals are really great, but they're quite tiring, and often the sound quality from when you're trying to hear the band is not that great if you're not in the ideal spot. So they have their upsides and their downsides, I think, festivals. One of the best ones that I went to that I really enjoyed was called All Tomorrow's Parties, and that was in Butlins in Minehead. So they took over Butlins, and all these indie kids went and stayed in the chalets there, and there was all this awesome music on for the whole weekend. So Pavement were curating that, and so they'd chosen all the other bands that were on there, and it was so it was a great weekend of music. That was.
Sounds fantastic. And what about gigs, Joe? Do you have a favourite gig? Do you have a standout gig?
Hard to say. Been loads of good ones, but I think Radiohead at their peak, when I saw them a few times, the energy that they had when they played was just incredible. They were electric when they were on top form. They were just, because that was at that time when I was kind of at that age where everything was just like so fantastic. It's at that time when music really hits you hardest, I think, isn't it? When you're kind of between 18 and 25. And, I'm really trying not to be that guy stuck in the 90s anymore. But in terms of the best gigs, then that was it.
Great stuff. So Joe's mentioned plenty of awesome acts and music so far, and he is a lucky man as he gets to collate his fantasy festival in this episode. So Joe gets to choose any 5 acts, one of whom must play one of their studio albums in full, and Joe also gets to pick an encore, which can be any song ever, which all 5 of his acts can perform together to close his fantasy festival. So for any first-time listeners, this is very simple. 5 acts take 5 time slots. So in the last episode of the pod, which I mentioned at the beginning, I had Stevie T on, and he created his Tweet in the Park Fantasy Festival. In his opening slot, he went for the Crooks. In his Super Seconds slot, he picked the Lutras. Midway Madness, he went for the Snuts and had Oasis as his pre-headliners. And for his headline act, he picked Big Country and had them play the Buffalo Skinners in full. And then to close his fantasy festival, he had all 5 acts perform Champagne Supernova, which was a fantastic fantasy festival. So Joe, before we talk about your 5 acts, we've got 2 very important things to decide on for your fantasy festival. We firstly need to give it a name, and then we need to give it a venue. So to start off with, Joe, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
So I'm going for the Mind Blown Festival.
I like that. I guess that's pretty self-explanatory, right?
I want music that's going to blow people's minds, basically.
Great stuff, Joe. So you can take us anywhere in the world. We can stick near you in Birmingham. We can go further out to wherever you want to take us in the UK. We can go worldwide. We can take it global. So wherever you want to go, Joe, we'll gladly follow you. So where are we going to hold the Mind Blown Festival?
So I decided to have it local, and it's in the middle of the country, so it's easy for everyone to get here. And there's loads of bits of vacant land in Birmingham. So I wanted it to be in an urban area in a big tent and constructed so that the sound is as good as it can possibly be. So, classical music, they have all these venues that are amazing, like Symphony Hall in Birmingham was designed so that it's got the perfect acoustics. So I would get somebody to make sure that this festival we put on will have the best possible sound system so that everyone is able to hear the music to its optimum.
All right, okay. I think Joe Adhemar might be getting a call to make sure the sound's right at your fantasy festival. So Joe's going to have to keep that date free. All right, so we're holding it in Birmingham. So before we talk about your 5 acts, Joe, I appreciate how difficult it is to collate a fantasy festival, and you need to whittle it down from many acts to 5. Before we talk about the 5, are there any acts who you want to mention who you love but just haven't made it into your fantasy festival lineup?
Oh, so many. I mean, because I like so many different styles of music, it's you got to have something that kind of goes together well. So, I'd love to have some acoustic music there, but it's not a really main stage of a festival thing. So I'd have loved to have some folk singers like Amelia Coburn or Ellie Gowers or there are loads of wonderful singers in that field at the moment. In terms of favorite bands of all time, like Radiohead, I really would have wanted to put them on there, but I went bigger than that. Or The Smile, even. I love Tom York and Johnny Greenwood's new band, The Smile. Sonic Youth would have been fantastic for this, but they didn't quite make it onto the lineup. Massive Attack, Blur, I don't know, loads of these bands that I really would have loved to have put on, but just didn't quite make it in the way I was doing the festival.
Well, there can only be 5. Blur, amazingly, still never been picked for a fantasy festival. Oh, no, they have.
No
actually,
way, really?
Tell a lie, they have. They got picked once. I keep thinking they've never been picked. So Blur will have to wait another day. They've only been picked. I thought you might pick Blur when you talk about the new album and you talk about Graham Coxon. I thought you might pick Radiohead, but they are gone. So let's go to it. Then 2:00 in Birmingham, Joe. The Mind Blown Festival sold out. Everyone's having a great time. Time for your opening act to take the stage. So, Joe, who's going to open your fantasy festival?
Right. So we've got a big noise to start with. We're going with My Bloody Valentine to open.
Great shout. Why them for you, Joe? Why My Bloody Valentine your fantasy festival opening?
I just want something that makes a big statement noise-wise, and they certainly do that. I've not been lucky enough to see them live, so it's kind of selfish because I wanted to make sure I got to see them. But, the Loveless album, I just think is one of the masterpieces of all time in terms of, genre-defining albums. And so many people tried to copy them, but nobody got close to making the same kind of noise that they do, I don't think. So, I just think it's a real statement at the start of the festival to have a band like that just really taking you to another dimension with the music that they play, and really messing with your mind with all the kind of guitar effects that they put on. And
great stuff.
It's powerful, but it's got great melodies, it's got texture, it's all the things I love.
Brilliant stuff, Joe. So My Bloody Valentine are going to open your fantasy festival. The second time they've been picked for fantasy festival. They also opened Pete Wilkinson from Cast's fantasy festival many moons ago, I think in episode 60. So they've had to wait another 76 episodes to get back to where they are. But Joe is bringing them to the Mind Blown Festival. They're going to play from 2 till 3 o'clock. We're going to take a break at 3 o'clock, and that will take us to 3:30. It'll be time for our Super Seconds Act. So, Joe, who's going to be your Super Seconds Act?
So the second one I've got, they also released an amazing new album recently, and I've gone for the wonderful PJ Harvey. She is such a great performer, and again, her songs and her switching of genres is incredible. So if she could play like some of the best bits from throughout her career, I just think that is such a body of work that she's got, and it covers so many different types of music. And you'd have really jump about bits, and then just really delicate songs with incredible lyrics. And I really wanted to make sure I didn't have a male only festival. So I wanted to have at least one female artist in there, and she is one of my favorites of all time as well. So PJ Harvey, Super Seconds.
That is a great shout. PJ Harvey also making her second appearance at Fantasy Festival. So she was on Derek Walklate's Fantasy Festival many moons ago as well as part of his Midway Madness setup. But tonight she's playing your Super Second slot. That's going to be a fantastic hour. That's going to make many people very happy to see her. She plays till 4:30. We'll take a half-hour break. That takes us to 5 o'clock. And it'll be time for our Midway Madness act. So, Joe, 2 down, 3 to go. So who's going to be your Midway Madness act?
Right, this is proper madness. So this is an act that my dad introduced me to. He was very, very keen on him, and he went on tour with him, and he said he was just as crazy as you would have hoped. So I'm going for the amazing Captain Beefheart to play in the Midway Madness spot.
Amazing. So your dad obviously was lucky enough to tour with him, like you said. I mean, were you ever lucky enough to meet Captain Beefheart?
No, he'd retired from public life, I think, by the time. He became quite a recluse, didn't he? I'm pretty sure he just went off and painted most of the last part of his life. So, yeah, this is a time-travelling festival, isn't it? You can bring anyone back from their peak, and is now the time when I tell you that they play an album in full, or do you want that at the end?
Yeah, you can tell us now. So what are you going to have Captain Beefheart play?
Well, obviously, Trout Mask Replica is his genius album, and so that's the one I would want to be played in full. I think he just about managed that in an hour. It's quite an intense listen, but yeah, I think that would definitely blow a few minds if he managed to pull off playing that in full.
We are going to have that at your fantasy festival. First time Captain Beefheart has been chosen for a fantasy festival, Joe. So we've got a new name on the roster. I think it's been spoken about a few times by some of the guys in the Lars, and I'm sure Pete Wilkinson also mentioned Captain Beefheart, but it gets to play an hour, 5 till 6, and we'll play Trout Mask Replica in full. So we'll take another half-hour break after their set. That'll take us to 6:30. That's 3 acts down, 2 acts left. So, Joe, who's going to be your pre-headline act, and who's going to take us from 6:30 to 8 o'clock?
So, some more fireworks now. We're going to go for Jimi Hendrix, the Jimi Hendrix Experience pre-headlining.
And I guess there's an easy pun for me to make here, right? With Jimi Hendrix in your name, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to resist the temptation of doing that. So, Joe, why Jimi Hendrix is going to take your pre-headline act?
He was such an amazing performer. You know, I would have loved to have seen him live. So, yeah, I mean, the gimmicky stuff, yeah, fine. It got him noticed, but just as a performer, as a songwriter, he wrote such amazing songs. And the fact that he could do those while playing those guitar licks, it's just like incredible. I've played simplified versions of some of his songs, but I could never dream of being able to play guitar like Hendrix. And yeah, playing in a trio, being like just him and bass player and a drummer, the three of them, they just were absolute amazing live act when you saw them on, because I used to watch videos of him playing some of his best gigs all the time when I was growing up. That was another one of my dad's favorites. So, yeah, I've got a lot of my dad's music in here, but it's all time classic stuff. I because this is a fantasy thing, I just wanted to go back in time a bit and choose some of these older acts rather than going for some of the ones that I've seen myself in my lifetime. I wanted to go, back in time, and Hendrix was one of those acts that I just was in awe of.
Well, you can do that. It's your fantasy festival, so you are more than welcome to do that. So Jimi Hendrix is making his 8th Fantastival appearance. He's going to take your pre-headline slot. He's going to give us an hour and a half of the finest guitar playing and singing ever. And so we'll take one more half-hour break, then that'll take us to 8:30, and it'll be time for your headline act to get 2.5 hours to headline your fantasy festival. So Joe, 4 down, 1 left. Who's going to headline the Mind Blown Festival?
So we want some really good vibes to finish off with. So we're going to have Bob Marley and the Wailers headlining. So, legend, absolute legend. Yeah. What could be better than singing along to Bob Marley songs at the end of an evening? I mean, he's got so many classics, and, he's got really brilliant upbeat songs and just ones that groove, and then some slower ones. And there's positive messages, there's angry stuff in there, there's protest songs. He would get everybody singing along with him. I'm absolutely positive of it. I couldn't think of anyone better than Bob Marley as a headliner.
Great stuff. So Bob Marley and the Wailers are going to headline your fantasy festival. They're going to give us 2.5 hours of some amazing music, and then at 11 o'clock they're going to bring back on stage Jimi Hendrix, Captain Beefheart, PJ Harvey, and My Bloody Valentine. That's an amazing stage you've got there, Joe. It's incredible what you've done there. And they all get to play one song that you get to tell them what that song is. So, Joe, what are you going to have your fantasy festival lineup play to close your fantasy festival?
So this is where we get some Radiohead. So I want them to play Paranoid Android together. I think it would be fantastic.
That would be brilliant. In my head, I'm trying to comprehend who does what part, but you got a wealth of talent. I know Jimi Hendrix would have an absolute whirl of the time with the riff.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's riffs galore. I mean, yeah, I could imagine PJ Harvey singing bits like Tom York quite easily. I think if we get a bit where it's kind of full on My Bloody Valentine, kind of like switch it up and bring some noise into it, change it a bit, and yeah, can add some horns in there from Bob Marley's kind of Wailers, that would be great. I think that would be the most amazing version of Paranoid Android ever.
It's a hard song to pull off, but your lineup could definitely do it. So that completes your fantasy festival. So let's lock it in before you change your mind. So we've got the Mind Blown Festival. I know we're holding it in Birmingham. Did we say Symphony Hall, or are we just going to hold it in a tent in Birmingham?
Yeah, in a tent in Birmingham. I mean, there's loads of big empty spaces that they're waiting to build on around Digbeth in Birmingham, which is a really cool area. There's loads of small venues around Digbeth, which are great to play gigs in anyway. So, you know, you could have after parties in all these brilliant Irish pubs and little venues around there.
Sounds great.
But yeah.
Sounds great. So going to Birmingham, in your opening act, we've got My Bloody Valentine, Super Seconds, PJ Harvey, Midway Madness, Captain Beefheart playing Trout Mask Replica. Pre-headline act, we've got Jimi Hendrix, and headlining your fantasy festival, we've got Bob Marley and the Wailers. And for your encore, they're all going to play Paranoid Android. Mr. Peacock, are we happy to lock that in to the Fantastival Vaults?
Absolutely.
Great stuff. What a fantastic lineup. So before we finish this one, Joe, tell us about what you got planned over the next couple of weeks, for the next couple of months. Seems very exciting. So first of all, we got the EP, right? So let's plug the EP again.
Yeah, so the Curse of the Mind EP is coming out on the 18th of August. So there's 4 tracks on it. You can pre-save it now. I will be plugging that around the podcast. I'll be putting links everywhere when you tweet it out. And yeah, so that's 18th of August. And then the month after that will be my next EP for my duo, The Mysteries, which is called Resist. It's 3 kind of political kind of songs that we've got in that one. So that'll be out mid to late September. We haven't got the date nailed down, but there's that one. And then I've got another EP that's half recorded after that, solo one, and yeah, loads of plans, loads of songs.
So loads of stuff going on, Joe. If anyone is listening and doesn't follow you already, how do people find you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Joe_Peacock. There's also, I've got a Facebook page, which is Joe Peacock Music. And if you're switching from Twitter, like a lot of people are, it's turning into X now, whatever, the X factor on. Yeah. I'm not going to give Elon Musk any money, so if it becomes obligatory to pay for X or whatever it is, then yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky if you've managed to make it on there as well. So I'll be, yeah, just look for Joe Peacock on there. I'm sure you'll find me. Yeah.
And there's also loads of impromptu songs you do, right? So we mentioned Murdered Song of the Day. So that's just for you most days and as and when?
Yeah, I generally post a couple of those a week. Depends what else is going on in my life at the time. And I also tend to put previews of new songs when I've just written a song, then I'll bang out a quick acoustic version just to see what people think of it as well. So always find something from me on there.
Brilliant stuff. So make sure to go and give Joe a follow. Make sure to pre-save his new AP. You won't regret it. It's a fantastic piece of work. So that is it, everyone. Thank you for listening to the 136th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. And if you've enjoyed this one, you can subscribe and give the Fantastival Podcast a review on iTunes if you'd be so kind. Or if you're listening on Spotify, you can follow the show. You can also give the show a rating, and you can also comment on the episode. So please do so. And we are also on Twitter, as is Joe. So give us a follow at FantastivalP if you don't do so already. And if you're not on Twitter, you can email us at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. Unfortunately, we don't play music on this podcast, but I'll get some tracks from Joe. We'll make a nice little Spotify playlist. And if you scroll down on your episode description, you'll be able to find a link there, and that will take you to all tracks mentioned by acts in this podcast. So Joe, thank you for being my 136th guest. It's been a great time. How have you found being on the podcast?
Yeah, I've loved it. It's been a good chat. Yeah, I always love talking about music and my music and other music that I'm passionate about. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. It's
been a pleasure to host you. Good luck with the EP, with all the forthcoming EPs. Seems like you're a very busy man, so I look forward to hearing what else is coming out this year, and wish you luck with that one. So that's it from me. I'm actually off on my summer holidays now, so I'll be back soon, right at the end of August, or maybe even early September. We'll be back with episode number 137. So please make sure to join me. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Have a great summer, and please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.